Welcome back, everyone. It's the Hashira Half Hour. We have missed you, but we are excited to be here with you tonight. It's Emily. I'll be your host tonight, and I'm joined, as always, by my friends.
What's up, y'all? Today is a little bit of a somber episode, but we'll get into that in a minute. But I'm very glad to be back here in the recording studio, ready to get some content for y'all.
Hey everyone. Yeah, it is a little bit of a bittersweet episode that we're giving you today, but very happy to be back. I know we've been kind of on and off hiatus lately, but that is the way of life. But the good news is Demon Slayer is coming in 2 months, so we have something to look forward to then.
Yes, we are counting down the days for sure. And as they both mentioned, we do have a special episode for you today. I would agree it's bittersweet, but it's also a celebration. It's been a tough few weeks for anime fans. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably are already a fan of anime, and so you're probably already aware of this. But the community suffered a major loss this past couple weeks in Akira Toriyama. So for those of you who don't already know, Akira Toriyama is one of the most renowned figures in the world of anime and manga especially, but he really is so influential that he's left his indelible mark on popular culture as a whole. He, of course, is the mangaka of Dragon Ball, which was famously adapted into Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, both of those animes for television. And if you know anything about Dragon Ball, you know that that means that this man is the creator of some of the most iconic animated characters and designs in the world. I would say that Goku at this point is probably a household name. I can at least speak for a lot of us who grew up here in the United States when Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z were coming out. Hashtag millennials for real. The number of kids I remember at recess trying to go Super Saiyan on the playground at school was like almost ubiquitous. There were so many, and our moms, I feel like they thought that every anime character was Goku. It didn't matter who was on the screen. That's just Goku. So it is definitely with a heavy heart, but a lot of happy memories that we remember Toriyama Sensei, as so many famous mangakas continue to call him, after he passed away just a few weeks ago. Without him, so many of the animes and mangas that we love so much today would not be what they are. So, as tribute, today, the Hashira Half Hour will be reviewing episode 1 of Dragon Ball and sharing moments where we caught early glimpses of things that we found similar to newer animes that might have taken some inspiration, or just some things that we enjoyed for its face value. So, I'm going to start by asking Hana, Bryan, have you ever seen this episode before?
I've not. I'll admittedly say I have never seen an episode from the franchise from start to finish, even though my husband is a Dragon Ball Z kid who grew up on that show. That's really what got him into anime from the time he was, very young. So to watch the first episode from the start to finish was definitely a new experience for me, which I know talk about a little bit here in a moment.
So funny enough, you asked this question. No, it's not the first time I've watched this episode. I did watch Dragon Ball. I was like, it was while I lived in Iowa. I watched Dragon Ball Super, all of Dragon Ball Super that was out. And I was like, I'm going to go back and watch all of Dragon Ball. And I started with Dragon Ball, like, regular. And then I watched the first, 3 episodes, and I was like, this is a timepiece for sure. I'll leave this in the timepiece bucket.
That's funny. So this was my first time seeing this episode for sure, and I admit it, like, I've just never taken the Dragon Ball journey. Perhaps after watching this I will, but I definitely have seen, like, episodes here and there. It's been a long time, but I remember, I think Dragon Ball Z Goku, I figured that out pretty quickly. After watching this first episode, I was like, oh, he's little. So does he get big in, like, episode 2? No, it's a whole second part. We'll get there eventually. Today we're going to focus on episode 1, but I had a blast watching this episode, to be honest with you. I had no expectation of anything that was in it, or like any preconceived notions, which I think is always really fun whenever you're watching something that you haven't seen before. Yeah, other than like generally that these characters are like big bulky guys later on that fight a lot. I had a blast. We'll get to that. So let's go ahead and dive in. I want to talk first about like the opening song, the intro sequence. As Bryan said, it definitely is a little bit of a product of its time, but let's talk about it. What did you think about this sequence compared to maybe like something newer that we would have seen, or just anything that caught your attention?
It's so easy to pick out like some of the tropes that you see now and like anime intros from this. Like the characters fighting and like previewing some of what you see, or at least now it's more of like a bunch of like really in-depth things. And I think the tropes that you see here are really like exaggerated from what this was at the time of the show being made. So like if you compare this to like the Shibuya opening, like you can see a lot of like that foreshadowing of what's to come and stuff like that. So I think that was a really neat thing to kind of see the origin of.
It felt very classic anime OP. I feel like we still get a lot of that now, but it's definitely evolved into I don't know how to describe what it is now, but and I can't really speak to foreshadowing in this because I don't really know the story. I've only watched episode 1 now. Will I watch the show? That's TBD, but it definitely felt very like, they're fighting. I wonder if this is going to happen or if this is just a random fight where these characters literally never even meet, because I have seen that before. And I know people talk about that a lot, but it was fun. I did see some parts of it, and it was very, very 90s, which is fun. It's classic. I've never watched something that's like super classic like that.
I think it's a lot of fun too. And I also watched the dub. That was also just like what default Crunchyroll pulled up for me. I genuinely did not even check to see if they had the other one because it just started. I'm like, here we go. And I just want to talk about the song. I'm like, the song was so quintessentially like 80s, 90s. Also, like, you know that you're watching something that's a little bit older if it has an OP that has an English version. I'm not sure whether that's the only version, but it has an English version.
So I can actually speak to that really quick. So Crunchyroll does have the original Japanese sub because my Crunchyroll automatically played that because that's how I have my settings, and Crunchyroll's like I just automatically have it to Japanese. And something that I noticed, like after I went in and switched, the song is actually like in English, but when you watch the sub version, it's in Japanese.
That's cool.
I've never seen an anime do that. I don't know if they just don't do that anymore, if it was too much work, or if it's because I know this was on like the Cartoon Network, so it was like everyone watched it. I don't know, but I found that very interesting because animes don't do that anymore. I no like anime that I can think of in recent years that also offers English dub, which is all of them really. Translates the song into English and plays that instead.
No, and I think that speaks to like the changing like appetite of the audience as well. It's like there's not really a need anymore, but it definitely was a thing in like the early 2000s. I know One Piece did it for sure with their first OP, and the English version is great. It's a lot of fun. A few others that I believe did this were like Sailor Moon, of course, had like an English opening song that was like absolutely incredible, and like I would count this as an anime still. Pokemon had like one of the best English opening songs of all time for Indigo League. So definitely a product of its time, but something that I thought was a lot of fun to listen to because they just don't do it like that anymore. So that being said, I've already admitted now that I watched it dubbed. That's what Crunchyroll pulled up for me. But like Hannah mentioned, I do think that's also the most popular option for people living in the West. And I thought that this was also very much a product of its time in that like these, for one thing, are like, and not that this is really a problem with animes, but like real voice actors, not just like celebrity names attached to it. Like I said, fortunately, that's not a huge problem for anime yet, but it is a problem in the industry as a whole. But since it is these voice actors and like just loosely translating to English, and it is approaching like 40 years at least, some of the dubbing's kind of crazy and not something that I think they could get away with today in kids' cartoons, among other things, but we'll get there. We're going to start with where this episode opens, which is with a young boy or monkey. He has a tail. We, of course, as the audience already know, the designs of these iconic characters, so we're not necessarily surprised, but we learn very quickly that we have now met young Goku. So what were your first impressions of this character? Was it possible to watch him without any preconceived notions from anywhere you've seen him before?
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts. First of all, I want to say yes, I agree with the whole dub thing. Like I said, I think Dragon Ball is the only and this is coming from someone who I watch sub because my husband is very like, we watch this in sub unless like we really can't do it. And he was like, yeah, watch this one in dub. So I think it's like a very common thing out here in the West to watch it in dub. But I would say I could tell, like, again, it was a product of its time. I think that I don't know what to think of, like, how I didn't know that he had a tail. Like, that's a whole new thing for me. So I hear a lot about Goku, mostly the people on the internet that are like, Goku solos, and are just like commenting that on like every video about anime ever, which is kind of weird, but whatever. So I'm sitting here like, I'm kind of expecting this to be like this big display of super strength, and just he just shows up, and I think they like literally introduced him and they were like, this kid would be like the strongest ever or whatever, and I'm like, okay, cool, we're just already the strongest ever. And then I realized, oh, maybe this is the story of how we get there, which sometimes animes do that, where like at the very beginning they pretty much say how it's gonna end. My Hero Academia does it. Case Study of Vanitas does it. I think there's one other that I can't think of off the top of my head. So anyway, I'm going on a tangent because I don't know. My first impressions of Goku is that he's kind of silly and very, 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 very not aware of the world, because it seems as if he's just kind of been in this little area, and then we later find out that he's just never seen a human before, so he's just kind of like, whoa, da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da, like, hello grandpa, this ball, what?
Classic. Gets me every time.
Yeah, I also watched it in English. There was no other way for me to watch it. Growing up as a kid, like, I watched Dragon Ball Z, even though I wasn't supposed to. Curse you, parents, for trying to tell me what to do. So I had to watch it in English just for the nostalgia of it. But yeah, I kind of like, having seen this episode before and having known a lot about Goku's character, it was really hard to try and like clear my preconceived notions, because I've seen all of what's animated for Super, which is like the most recent thing, and I know a lot about Dragon Ball Z, and I mean, I even have my Frieza statue in my office. So like, this is definitely a series that I would consider, like, I guess it's like a realization that I'm having right now, but this is a series that means a lot to me. So I guess you could say, like, it was really hard for me to like try and watch it without knowing what comes, but I definitely think that like this little guy is a goofy ball, and I think he is kind of what kickstarted like the goofy protagonist thing. Like, even in like Tanjiro, like being like the demon or the train itself, Zenitsu, this might be a local deity, you never know. And he's like just an unknowing bumpkin. It's kind of the same thing with Goku.
100%. I definitely see a lot of some of the most famous shonen main characters in Goku. So it's, like the references are obvious, but it is kind of funny because I think it's really hard to look at this character with zero preconceived notions, even if you've never seen a single episode, because like, if you're aware of popular culture, you at least know this character's name and probably kind of that he's like a big beefy guy that fights. So to me, this like humanized him a bit more, even though he's like half monkey or whatever we have going on at this point. It's like, this is just a kid. And we're not at that point. We know that he gets there, but this makes him like rooted in something that like we can relate to, I think.
Yeah, I can definitely tell that, like, immediately I'm like, okay, I can see that there's a lot of shonen out there that is heavily inspired by it. I won't say I necessarily thought of Tanjiro, but I thought of a mix of just like all the shonen characters that I've seen and that I've met, and can like pull out characteristics where I'm like, okay, that makes sense that Dragon Ball is kind of considered to be that one anime that most shonen is kind of evolved from.
It's very, very cool to be able to see that in like the first 2 minutes of the episode. That being said, this episode does move pretty quick. There's a lot going on. Not long after we meet Goku, we meet another new character who is the blueprint, I think, for so many female characters in anime. We get to meet Bulma. She crash lands her entrance, literally, and then she doesn't mess around, and she like pulls the Glock on Goku real quick. Which is just, I'm like, that's just another thing I don't think we could do anymore, because if we did, it's like Jujutsu Kaisen would be this long. Demon Slayer would be this long if they gave it to anybody other than Genya.
Oh no! Don't come for my boy like that, man.
One Piece, if they gave Nami a Glock right at the beginning, it would be like this. And yet they do it here and it works. I'm like, okay, so we're starting here. Absolutely incredible. What were your first impressions of Bulma and this interaction with Goku?
I literally remember watching the episode the first time in Iowa being like, this is who my bad bitch was. And like, let me be real. I'm realizing as we're talking about this show that this show means a lot more to me. The car that I no longer have, but it was an electric vehicle, it was bright blue, was named Bulma. So I guess this episode is a tribute to my car as well. Bulma is pretty crazy for the fact that she pulls out the gun and tries to shoot a small child. I mean, it's a child. Yes, he threw your car, but still a kid. Come on.
There was like no hesitation either. Like the car got thrown and she was like bam 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 and I was like, bro. I thought this was fun. I can tell it's like a female anime like a female shonen character before things maybe got a little better. However, she does still seem a little bit like a strong independent woman, but also then later on like she clearly is the damsel in distress, so it's like, okay, like we're getting both sides here, which is common again in shonen. But I enjoyed her introduction. The sequence that happened right before it, though, blew my mind. And I like how we just kind of skipped over that, which is fine. I just have to say it was not on my bingo card to see
Goku's Willy?
I'm surprised I did not know, because that seems like something that people would talk about all the time.
I had literally every moment of this episode was a surprise to me. And I was like, maybe I didn't know about this because I have no idea. I did not do research. I would need to look, but like I feel like they probably would have considered censoring that on like Cartoon Network or something.
I'm sure it was.
So,
probably.
I mean, granted, like as long as you're not a weirdo, like who cares? But I was absolutely not expecting it because we don't ever see that. It's another thing you like couldn't get away with now.
Yeah, like you people see butt cheeks all the time, but like they always strategically place in other areas. So I was expecting that, and then I was like, ah,
like there it is.
All right, okay, got a good idea for what the story is about. Anyway, not to take away from our girl Bulma, she's great. That just I couldn't get over that. That was like
absolutely incredible. Very much a product of its time. Where have our minds gone? Of course, we have like this interaction between Bulma and Goku. He ends up like telling her, you know, I've never seen another human being before. This is the first time, or at least I've never seen a girl. It's unclear at this point if he got to be with his grandpa before his grandpa became Dragon Ball, like Oppenheimer become Death. Not sure. But it's his first time seeing a girl. They're having this interaction. He's like interested to learn a little bit more about her, so he invites her back to his home. And she is clearly looking for something that seems to be the same direction, so she agrees to go along with him. She gets really excited when they get there, and she realizes that he has one of what we now learn is called the Dragon Balls. And he lovingly, of course, calls this his grandpa. So Bulma has to explain to Goku that it is one of the Dragon Balls, and that these are actually a set of gems that are sought after by both good and evil entities, because if you collect all of them, there are 7, it will summon a wish-granting dragon. And then we also get a little peek here at what we can assume is probably a villain.
Yeah. I like that this showed that Bulma smart, maybe, you know, like she kind of like seems to know how this works, and she also then, you know, kind of tries to I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but she like kind of manipulates him into being like, okay, well, showing my underwear doesn't work, which was so shonen. And then she like, oh, that's not gonna work, so I'm just gonna say your grandpa would be proud if you went and saw the world. And I think that'll be good for him, but I think seeing that there is clearly some villains who are on this kind of same journey right now by getting 1, and now they have 3. I can definitely tell the story is very much leading up to like who's going to get all 7 first, and I'm sure they're going to meet up at some point and have to fight for the balls that they have. It makes for like an interesting story. I can see why this would be very popular, but I couldn't get over the multiple mention of balls either. I'm sorry.
I have to say, I'm gonna be like so immature here for a minute, but Bulma being like, I can't wait to use them and wish for a boyfriend. And I'm like, oh, so it's not the only kind of balls you're hunting.
Oh!
I think it's partially because I'm not used to watching anime subbed. So like I just keep hearing them say balls, balls, balls.
Balls.
And that's how the Hashira Half Hour got a negative 5-star rating.
I'm so sorry, everybody.
We're not sorry.
It is kind of funny, though. The nuances of language.
It really shines through when you watch something in English. It's like, yeah, my brain goes to weird places.
I am 5 years old. Perfect.
But yeah, getting to see kind of Pilaf as like the antagonist, you can tell it's like very easy to pick out that he's the bad guy. He's like, I want to rule the world. Blah. It's like very simple, but it's also very like corny, and I think that's so much fun for like villainy, because I think that's what we kind of all grew up on, is like it's very clear the bad guy is the bad guy. There's no like gray area, and I think I guess that's kind of nice to take a break from. Whereas like you look at like these demons in Demon Slayer and you see like, well, oh my god, no, they were like abused as kids, and Daki and Gyutaro had an awful life, and da 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 da. But like, nah, he's just a bad guy. He just wants to rule the world. Like, there's nothing else to it. And I think that's the nice part about like these older animes, is like it's somewhat of just like a fun show. And I think that's what makes this kind of really nice to look back at.
Villains that just want world domination are the most fun.
They're usually the
They really
funniest, too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but Frieza is a sassy gay, and I will never, ever let that go, okay? He reads Goku and calls him a monkey all the time, and it's so funny.
Mighty Lord Frieza. That's all I know. I'm gonna have to watch more to find out. I do know what he looks like. I do know.
I think, is he the one that looks like Meruem from Hunter x Hunter?
Yeah, hold on.
Not the Frieza figure.
I remember when Jordan and I got to that point. Yeah, when we got to that point in Hunter x Hunter where is it Meruem? Meruem? I can't remember. Anyway, when we got to that point in the anime, Jordan was instantly like, he looks just like a Dragon Ball villain. And he like couldn't get past that. It was funny.
It is funny. Yet another inspiration. We'll get there. Very, very like unserious villain so far, which is totally fun and makes sense for some of these super early episodes. I feel like you've got to have like one that is presented pretty quickly that can hopefully easily be taken down by our protagonist, because we've got to set a precedent if he's going to be the strongest, right? So, fun little sneak peek, but they're clearly in a different location. But Bulma is really trying to like twist Goku's arm here to get that Dragon Ball. He's not willing to give it up because he's like, this is literally my grandpa. So she's like, you know what? I'm not going to try to convince him, but I'm smarter than him. I'm going to try to like get the best of him mentally. So why don't you, Goku, come with me on my journey? And then you will have an eye on your grandpa. And she's like secretly thinking, but I'll get what I want and I'll get to like make my wish at the end. He's naive. He's like a cute little kid and he quickly agrees to this adventure. Here's our call to action. They get ready to leave. We see one of Bulma's like big city tricks where she takes a small pill out of a pouch and it just like turns into a motorcycle right away. And then they set off in the direction of the next Dragon Ball. This was fun. Definitely reminded me of Akira, which, you know, of course, funnily enough, shares a name unrelated to the mangaka. But there could be some influence there too. I just looked it up and Akira came out like 2 years after the first episode of Dragon Ball. So it's interesting to see, like, and that's considered largely one of the most influential movies ever of like anything at all. It's fun to see like these kind of like futuristic nods. It's like there's a little bit of everything in this episode so far. What did you guys think?
I thought that this was really fun, especially seeing kind of like the Jetson style, and also where are these things? You know, this was made in the 90s. Why have we not perfected this technology by now? You know, that's what I'm wondering really. Uh, but I like that this is something that like Goku, it's the first time Goku's seeing this and he's like, it's a monster. And he's like poking it with his staff and stuff. Like, it's just a really fun thing for us to see like a kid exploring, like I said, kind of like the Tanjiro vibes of like Country Bumpkin, but also kind of like uh you know, like watching a baby see a magic trick the first time. Like, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, he's just got eyes wide and he's amazed. He also called Bulma a monster when she first showed up, and he, punched her car away, and then she hit him with bullets that didn't affect him, and he's like, who are you, monster? And what is this monster? And what is that monster? She's like, I'm a human and this is a car. Like, you know. But it's like he's been living in this very, secluded area, and like I said, this is the first human he's ever seen, so everything that she's doing is like this new and exciting thing for him, and it is kind of like watching a baby like see a magic trick for the first time or just experience things for the first time, because he kind of is at that level because of the fact that he's lived in his little world for as long, however long it's been. So kind of fun. I like that Bulma is the one that's going to be, showing off all this new stuff. I feel like, she obviously has the idea of probably stealing his Dragon Ball at some point. Like right now she's very much like manipulating him into coming, like I talked about. Very smart, very sassy, like her a lot. But I can also see this turning into easily a romance, or like at least like they become really good friends and she'll end up helping him like collect all 7 or something. But it was a definite like fun little call to action and like a start of a story. Again, am I gonna keep watching it? Maybe I will. Who knows? This might, just be something that I throw on when I'm cooking because it's the only anime I'll watch dubbed. It was fun and it was cute, and I like the introduction to like what the plan is and what they're gonna do, because I think there's definitely some opportunity for some character growth here, and also we're just seeing a lot of those shonen tropes that I'm like, oh, I've seen that before. Oh wait, this is probably where it started.
Yeah, I just think that's so cool. I don't know that I'll get over that, but it was really enlightening to watch this with fresh adult eyes for the first time. So they set off in the direction of the Dragon Ball, but it doesn't take very long for Bulma to need a little pit stop, and then she gets kidnapped almost immediately by a smooth-talking kaiju. So we've just established that, like, there are dinosaurs here. I guess that's not out of the realm of possibility for, like, a boy who's just hanging out with a tail, and, like, that's not one of Bulma's questions either. She's like, that's fine. She gets swooped up by, like, a pterodactyl, and Goku takes him down pretty quickly here. What did you think of our first fight sequence with this main character?
It was interesting for sure. I mean, I definitely was a little bit like, okay, she's the damsel in distress now, like just instantly gets caught, can't do anything, right? But I can see like obviously we're trying to show off kind of what Goku is probably capable of. Still don't know if he's supposed to be like super super strong now or later. We obviously saw that he was like bulletproof, and he's pretty smart in a pinch, was able to come up with a plan very, very quickly and get to her fairly fast. The whole scene played out really funny too, the way she was like, I need, pit stop. And he's like, what? What does that mean? And then she's like, I need a pee. And he's like, why doesn't she just do it here? It's like, oh, you don't know. And it's so funny. Really like a little toddler, like learning about human anatomy now. But yeah, there's creatures. I mean, I know that this world is very like it's a made up world. It's not set in like any real country or anything like that. It's full of creatures. So I know like that much as well. But definitely an interesting creature introduction, and interesting to see Goku be able to come up with a plan that doesn't really show off his strength, really. It just kind of was like, oh, that's pretty smart. Good job.
I thought it was cute. I thought it was really cute because at the end he is like, I really don't like hurting anybody, but he gave me no choice. I was also doing my Goku voice, so
I was crying. Let me just this is going to be a preview of my favorite moment. I'm doing this way too early, but like the dub was so unhinged after that because he like cracked part of the guy's like like head off, and then he like crashes down, like literally like plummets to his death. Goku's like, oh, too bad.
Aw, shucks. I didn't
was
want to hurt
saying
anyone
that.
today.
I was saying that on repeat all last night and today to Tom. I'm like, oh, like me going to work. I'm like, too bad.
Unhinged.
So funny. So funny.
If this is what the dub is, I want to know what the sub is at this point. If everyone's like, oh, the dub is better when it's this cheesy and silly, I'm like, I kind of want to hear the sub. What was up with the sub?
He's like, sayonara, pterodactyl-san. I don't know why I just gave like child Goku such a deep voice.
Isn't the whole point is that Goku and sub is like a young girl or something, and it's like super high pitched or something? Wasn't that why most people don't like it or something along those lines?
I mean, this was, I thought, pretty obviously like a young girl too, voicing this, but he's like, what is he, like not even like 10 years old?
Something
so like
young,
like little.
yeah.
I'm like, maybe Bulma's like between the ages of like 10 to 14 here, I think.
Yeah.
They're both pretty little, but hysterical. At this point, I think it's time to talk like comparisons. So I just want to have like an open discussion. Feel free to chime in anytime. What are like some things in this episode that reminded you of other things? We've already mentioned this a few times. So like what influences could you pull, like maybe moments from some of your other favorite animes? I'll go first. The opening sequence, of course, I already mentioned. It reminds me of like early Pokemon, Indigo League. The intro reminded me of that. The quality just of the voice acting too, and like the kind of unhinged nature of like these English voice actors early in the day. And also actually just like the sound of Goku and Bulma kind of did remind me of like Ash and Misty. And hearing those characters back in the day, I'm like, I know it's not the same actors, at least I'm pretty sure, but they do have like a similar quality of like banter between them. I thought that was really fun. There's a lot of similarities to One Piece here, which is not a surprise. If you're a fan of One Piece, you've probably seen or heard that like Oda has said a million times that Dragon Ball is an enormous inspiration for him. So like you've got this main character who's always hungry. Bulma reminds me so much of Nami. She's like not exactly a thief just yet because she hasn't taken anything without consent that we know about at this point, but she's definitely after something that will end her journey with a reward. So she's in it for herself, but she's not afraid to use her wiles to get what she wants, which is fun. Some of these sequences are just insane where these like he's just like flying through the air on the motorcycle, but then he's like, actually, I can fly better than I thought, and now I'm going to like extend this huge pole and knock down this like pterodactyl that's already like 3 miles up in the air carrying people, and also we're both gonna land and be fine. And I'm like, that is a shonen thing for sure. I don't even know if I could harken that to like a specific moment, because I feel like I've seen that a million times, and it's like, oh, but if I like trip and fall wrong, like I will be no more. But they're fine. It also, like, we've already mentioned Hunter x Hunter. Meruem totally looks like Frieza, who we haven't seen yet, if we're talking just about this episode. It reminds me a lot of the first episode of Hunter x Hunter, too, where we have Gon, who's, like, fishing for the Master of the Lake, I think. And you have Goku, like, also, like, fishing and like, kind of perched on this mountainside alone. And also just, like, the way that they look in their young appearance is kind of similar, I think, as well. So those are a few for me. I've talked about a lot. What did you guys notice?
I was gonna say the hungry thing as well. Like, kind of gives me the Naruto vibes of always eating the ramen, or I guess I keep bringing up Tanjiro. Maybe Hana and I switched places today. Tanjiro just being the Literally, that's what Tanjiro was in the first episode of the swordsman or of the Hashira training arc. So I think that was really interesting. I think Bulma. I wish I could say Bulma was like the female characters in JJK without being super sexualized, but unfortunately, I didn't get that one. But I mean, even still, like she had her wits about her, and I think she definitely like played to her strengths when she could, which I think was the most important thing there is like she definitely set the standard, I think, for what a female character should be in their own way. And I think that was really interesting, especially like being like the techie kind of one. Like women can be smart and powerful. And I think that probably meant a lot to a lot of girls growing up watching the show.
I'll admit it's harder for me to come up with comparisons just because I'm by far the newest to anime of this group for sure, and I tend to stay in my little comfy box of shows I've already watched. So I can definitely make a few like calls to Demon Slayer for sure. You know, I do see Tanjiro traits within Goku of just kind of being that silly kid that is very sheltered and doesn't really understand the world. Obviously, Goku is way more in like extreme than Tanjiro is because he at least, you know, had a family and knew what humans were and knew anatomy and you know like regular stuff like that, but still very sheltered and doesn't understand the world around him necessarily that much. I also would say just to call out the always hungry thing, it's something that I've seen probably in every anime. There's at least one character that's just literally always wanting food. Like Inosuke is the one I can think of in Demon Slayer. Let's see here. In Attack on Titan, we had Sasha. In Jujutsu Kaisen, I guess it's just like there's just a lot of like like they're eating. Like I'm always hungry when I'm eating when I'm watching anime because it's like they're always eating and there's always someone who wants to eat.
Usually hungry for them fingers.
That's actually a good point. I was gonna bring up like this idea of like a certain number having like an importance attached to it in the show. It's like they were very specific. There are 7 Dragon Balls. You have to have all 7, you know, and then you have like Jujutsu Kaisen. There are so many Sukuna fingers.
And in
you
Demon
know,
Slayer,
like
there's so many Hashira and demons.
mm-hmm.
Upper moon demons, lower moon demons. Yeah. I can also see like because I think Hunter x Hunter is probably the most classic style anime that I've watched from start to finish. I did watch the remake of it, but it still had its very just I think Jordan called out many more times that when we were watching it that it was very Pokemon feeling, and I admittedly haven't watched Pokemon either. I feel like I'm gonna get blasted by people. I just haven't like I haven't really watched classics because I didn't grow up with it, and you know because anime is grown so much now and I get so much out of what is coming out now. I feel like of course there can be a point to me watching the older animes, the classic animes, but I think that animes are so good now to kind of be like, okay, those are the time vault ones. Like, okay, if I have a lot of extra time, I'll sit down and maybe watch a few episodes, but it's not like a requirement. Anyway, yeah, I can just see, like I've said multiple times, I can call a lot of these tropes and be like, yep, seen that before. Definitely have seen the whole like, can't fly. 2 seconds later is pretty much flying, you know? And it's funny because animes nowadays get called out for that, and I'm like, it's kind of a thing that we just see in anime a lot. Like, I can't do this. 5 minutes later, doing that because they figured it out. And, you know, it's fine. You gotta be okay with that kind of stuff if you're gonna watch anime. Just saying.
That's showbiz, baby. It's like almost crazy to see just in one episode how much you can already interpret in things that you have seen later, regardless of how little or how much you may have seen. There is a massive influence because for the most part what he was doing with everything here was the first time that it really had been differentiated and done like that. So again, I just think it's just like so remarkable. I certainly am not alone. There was a massive outpouring of love and grief when this announcement came out that Toriyama had passed away. I want to take a moment just to talk about some of those reactions and pay that homage. So a few of the writers that we've talked about, notably the big three shonen animes that kind of dominated more of our childhoods. Dragon Ball's even a little bit old, I think, for those, like, for the three of us. We grew up as, like, Naruto and Bleach and One Piece were all coming out around that time. Those mangakas are also, like, extremely world renowned, and they've all paid homage to Toriyama. So I'm just gonna read a little bit from, like, each of their notes. I'm gonna make everybody cry here. These people are so poetic, by the way. I guess you would expect that because they're writers, but I thought that their statements were just gorgeous. So I'll start with Oda. He says, "It is too early. The hole is too big. Sadness washes over me when I think that I will never see him again." And then, he says a lot more, but he ends the note with respect and gratitude for the creative world Toriyama has left behind. I pray for his soul to rest in peace. May heaven be the joyous world he envisioned. What a beautiful statement. Just gorgeous and heart-wrenching. We'll move on to Naruto's mangaka Kishimoto. He says, "I just received the news of Sensei's passing. I feel a tremendous sense of loss, more than when Dragon Ball ended. I still don't know how to deal with this hole in my heart. I can't even read Dragon Ball, which I love. If I could really have one Dragon Ball wish come true, I'm sorry. That may be selfish of me, but I am sad. Thank you for 45 years of enjoyable works. Thank you for your hard work. Please take care of yourselves. I pray that Akira Toriyama sensei may rest in peace." Also so nice. And then lastly, we have a statement from the mangaka of Bleach, Kubo. His was interesting compared to the other two to me because it starts, he's like, "Personally, I don't feel any loneliness or pain," which is kind of wild. And I'm like, I admittedly have not really watched Bleach yet, but I wonder if that's like in line with what Bleach is kind of about.
Can also be a translation thing too.
That's
like,
true.
It can sometimes be really hard to, like, they'll say expressions that just doesn't translate into English no matter what way you look at it.
Yeah. He says that, but then he does go on and he says, "It's the death of someone I've read since I was a child, someone who works in the same magazine as me, and someone I'm deeply influenced by. So it feels different than when I deal with death in general, but that's why I feel like it doesn't exist. I've never really talked about this to anyone, but I've always believed that creating things means expanding your sensibilities and expanding your life. This is because I believe that as long as the work exists, the author's not dead. And I believe that being able to properly get used to this feeling is proof of the magnitude of the work's existence that remains in my heart." That's all. From the next post, I will continue with my usual enthusiasm. So, little sense of humor, but like also dropping some like really big truth bombs here. Clearly, the impact that this creator had on the world was absolutely remarkable. I just listed a few of the mangakas to get started, but this really was across so many industries that there were tributes. There was stuff from The Weeknd. Chance the Rapper posted something. There was a post from the president of France. Jackie Chan posted something. So this man's impact was really felt all over the world, for sure.
I think Dragon Ball really is what started the generation of anime being, beyond the walls of Japan. I know that there's a lot of other classics that have pushed that, like Naruto, One Piece and Bleach, Sailor Moon, but I think one thing that all of these words really goes to show is that Dragon Ball is the thing that truly started it all. It not only started just this empire of shonen stories that is, what it is today, but also the way that, there's people outside of Japan, people that would we think watches anime? Maybe doesn't, but at least watch Dragon Ball because of just how much influence it had over the world in general. And I think that, these words from all these people really just proves what kind of world and what kind of thing that he created was more than just a story. It was beyond that. It was like the livelihood of many other people. So, yeah, he did a lot for this world, and he did a lot for anime fans in general, but he also did a lot just for the entertainment world and beyond that, truly.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it on the head, Hannah. And I think it kind of really goes to show that like everybody kind of knows who Goku is, even if you haven't seen Dragon Ball. Like that, like he really put anime on the map for around the world, and for like a lot of people in like other countries, because I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter, like a lot of people were rallying for support for him, and like doing like meetups and stuff. Even like the gaming community in one of the Dragon Ball games was doing an homage to him by all doing like the lend me your energy. I mean, there have just been like so many people who have poured out their hearts for him, because it shows how much he's impacted the world around him and how much he's created in this world that clearly sparked a lot of what we know today. So it's really hard to see like someone who is really so honored go, but I'm glad that everything that they did means something.
Absolutely. Thank you, Toriyama sensei. All right, guys. With that, we need to try to wrap this episode up before it goes over 9,000. Sorry. Shall we discuss our favorite moments? I'll go first. Should not be a surprise, but just like the quips from the voice acting, I think really did it for me. It was very nostalgic to hear something like this, but also like super unhinged, which is exactly my sense of humor. So like hearing him go, "Oh, too bad," after he just like casually killed that guy. Or like when and like obviously this was a questionable moment, but Bulma being like, "I'll give you a peek if you give me the Dragon Ball." He's like, "Well, what good are your granny panties gonna do me?" I'm like, this is incredible. They couldn't do this today, those cowards. No, but just like, and I admit that I like pain. I watch a lot of shows that are like sad. So I really enjoyed watching an episode that was just so funny. And it's also like, that's probably why I enjoy One Piece as much as I am enjoying watching it, and like early Naruto and all the things that are influenced by it. It's like sometimes you just gotta laugh. You just gotta be able to have a good time with the main character and not be in pain all the time. And this show seems like it's really, really good for that. So I think I will probably be continuing, although probably at a slow pace.
Yeah, I think my favorite moment was probably watching the wackiest fight scene I've seen or I've watched in a while. Just watching him like go extendo staff and then bonking him on the head was just wild, because I'm like, of course he has a staff that extends. Like, how else was he gonna beat this guy? Like, he climbed out of the bike that was already like 3 miles in the air, and then he jumped off of the bike, and then he's like, I got this, no worries. And then Balma's like stuck on the cliff with the like staff through her shirt. Like, this is ridiculous, but it's also funny because it's just an anime, and I think that's what kind of created the creativity for anime.
It was very chaotic. I will say, now that I think about it, now that we've mentioned it, there's one thing that other shonens apparently weren't influenced by, but do it now, is that the first episode starts with trauma. This episode was a nice, refreshing, not trauma-filled episode. I'm like sitting there prepared for like us to see his grandfather die a slow and painful death, or like he arrives and he's dead and it's like there's blood everywhere. Nope, that didn't happen. Okay, cool. We just had fun. I love that. That's a nice little break from the shonen trope of trauma. Now, favorite moment, my head keeps going to this moment, and again, like unhinged dub. He just, first of all, I noticed he just kept on saying like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my," and I was just like, okay. And then he was like, "Tell me, what do you think?" Like, "I'm hungry. Tell me, what do you? I'll let you decide. Tell me, what do you want?" And it's just like,
But sometimes it do be like that, and then you end up with girl dinner. Which is exactly what he did.
Girl dinner.
Girl dinner.
I don't know why. That just made me laugh so much to hear him sitting there going, "I'm hungry. Tell me, what do you feel like?" Oh, that's what you want, tummy. Like, I'm paraphrasing at this point, but I remember him specifically saying the word tummy twice, which I think is just so funny. Like,
and then you're like, oh wait, but he doesn't have anybody to talk to though.
So he's talking to his tummy. Maybe there is trauma here.
Abandonment issues.
Oh.
Oh, Goku.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
man. Well, this has been fun, guys. I had an absolute blast, and I can see why it's so well beloved, even just in one episode. So let us know what you think. Leave us some comments if you have any thoughts. But of course, we're just happy to be able to get together. Toriyama's also partially the reason that the three of us are here together doing any of this. We wouldn't be here without the things that were influenced by his work. So, we just want to wish easy rest in eternity to an absolute legendary monolithic figure that the world was lucky to have. I'm going to quote one of his direct influences from a chapter and episode that made me cry my eyes out. This is, of course, from Mr. Oda Sensei, but he says, "When does a man die? When his heart stops? No. A man dies when he is forgotten." And that's very similar to the sentiment that we got directly from some of those mangaka. So, absolutely true. I'm also going to sort of quote the actress made famous by giving this original shonen lead a voice, and her condolences included the line, "We'll take care of Goku for you." So, with that, we will absolutely make sure that he is carried into eternity as well. For now, that's all the time that we have for this week. So we hope you enjoyed and that you'll come back next week. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell on YouTube, give us a download of the podcast, and follow us on TikTok and Instagram. We are at Hashira Half Hour, and we are on X at Hashira Half. Until next week, Kamehameha.
I don't know what this is in reference to, but Kamehameha.
Kame, Kame,
Ha!
That is my audition for Big Beefy Extra number 3. Oh man, all right guys, see you next week.